When I left my parents' house for the last time, I did not cry. I smiled. I told myself I was being brave. But now, when I think back, I realize that smile was not strength. It was fear, hiding quietly behind my lips. The door closed softly behind me that morning.
No shouting. No dramatic goodbye.
Just the sound of the latch, and my mother standing still in the doorway. She did not stop me. She never did. I remember the way her hands were folded together, like she was holding something invisible. Maybe she was holding her heart. Maybe she was holding back words she knew would not change my mind. My father stood behind her, silent as always. He nodded once slowly as if saying, "Go. Live your life." I thought freedom waited for me outside that house. I thought happiness was finally mine. I was wrong. I grew up in a small, quiet home where mornings smelled like tea and warm bread. It was not a rich house. The paint on the walls had faded over the years. The furniture did not match, but it was safe. It was steady. It was full of love that never asked for anything in return. My mother woke up before sunrise every day. She moved softly, careful not to wake anyone. I used to hear the sound of water in the kitchen, the gentle clink of cups. Sometimes I would pretend to be asleep, just so I could hear her humming. She always hummed the same tune. I never knew where it came from, but it felt like home. My father worked long hours. His hands were rough, his back always tired. But no matter how exhausted he was, he sat with us every evening at the small dining table. That table saw everything. Our laughter, our silence, our prayers before meals. It was not perfect, but it was ours. As I grew older, I began to feel something heavy inside me, a quiet restlessness. I wanted more space, more noise, more life. I started comparing my life with others. Friends who moved away. Friends who spoke about independence like it was air they needed to breathe. Slowly, without realizing it, I started seeing my parents' care as control. Their concern felt like limits. Their questions felt like pressure. Where are you going? Did you eat? Be careful. They were simple words, but to me, they sounded like chains. One evening, I remember saying to my mother, "I need to live my own life." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said softly, "You always had your own life, my child." I did not understand then. The decision to leave did not happen in one day. It grew quietly, like a crack in a wall. At first, I talked about it casually. I might move out someday. Maybe I'll live closer to work. My parents listened. They did not argue. They never tried to stop me. That silence should have warned me. But I mistook it for agreement. The night before I left, my mother packed my bag. I told her I could do it myself. She smiled and said, "I know." She folded my clothes neatly. She placed them carefully, like she was putting pieces of herself inside that bag. She added a small envelope. I did not ask what it was. That night, I could not sleep. The house felt different. Too quiet. Too aware. I heard my parents talking in whispers in their room. I did not hear the words, but I heard the weight in their voices. I turned to the wall and closed my eyes. The morning I left, the sky was gray. Not raining, just heavy. My father carried my bag to the door. My mother adjusted my scarf, the way she always did. "Call us when you reach," she said. "I will," I replied quickly. I hugged them both. It felt normal. Too normal. Then I walked away. I did not look back. That is the part that hurts the most now. Life outside moved fast. New place. New routine. New people. At first, everything felt exciting. I decorated my room. I enjoyed the silence. No one asking questions. No one waiting for me. But silence, I learned, can be very loud. I spoke to my parents less and less. Not because I did not care, but because I was busy proving to myself that I was free. My mother, Alwa, asked the same things. "Are you eating well? Are you sleeping enough?" I answered quickly, sometimes impatiently. My father rarely spoke on the phone, but when he did, he always said, "We are fine. Don't worry." I believed him. One evening, it rained heavily. I sat by my window, watching water slide down the glass. For the first time, I missed home. Not the house, but the feeling. I remembered the sound of my mother's footsteps in the kitchen. The way my father cleared his throat before speaking. I told myself this feeling would pass. It didn't. That was the beginning. The quiet beginning of regret. And I did not know then that soon I would wish I could turn back time just once and look at them before walking away. At first, the distance between me and my parents felt small, manageable, like something I could cross anytime I wanted. I told myself, they're just a phone call away. I believed that was enough. But days have a strange way of turning into weeks. Weeks quietly become months. And before you know it, silence starts to feel normal. I woke up every morning to the sound of traffic instead of birds, to alarms instead of my mother's soft voice calling my name. I ate alone, often standing, often in a hurry. At home, meals were moments. Outside, they were tasks. I did not notice the change at first. I was too busy adjusting, too busy becoming someone I thought I needed to be. My mother called often in the beginning, sometimes just to hear my voice. Did you eat today? Yes, Ma. Did you come home safe? Yes, Ma. The conversations were short, efficient, empty. One evening she said, "You sound tired." I replied,
Ai fine.
"Just busy." There was a pause. Then she said, "Okay, rest well." That pause stayed with me long after the call ended. My father called less. He was never one to disturb. When he did call, he asked about work, about money, about practical things. He did not ask if I was lonely. He never asked if I missed home. But sometimes, just before hanging up, he would say softly, "Your mother worries." I would sigh and say, "Tell her not to." I did not understand then that worrying was her way of loving. Slowly, my visits became rare. At first, I had reasons. Work deadlines. Travel fatigue. Later, I just stopped explaining. Every time my mother asked, "When will you come home?" I replied, "Soon." Soon became a word with no meaning. One weekend, I finally went back. The house looked the same, but it felt different. The walls felt quieter. The rooms felt bigger. My mother hugged me tightly, a little too tightly, like she was afraid I might disappear again. My father smiled, but his eyes looked tired. During dinner, they kept asking about my life. I answered politely. I noticed my mother was eating less. My father coughed more than usual. I noticed everything. And yet I said nothing. That night, I slept in my old room. The walls were still covered with memories. I stared at the ceiling and felt like a guest in my own home. The next morning, my mother packed food for me again. Just like before. I smiled and said, "Ma, I can buy food." She nodded, but still packed it. As I left, she said, "Don't wait too long next time." I replied, "I won't." I did. After that visit, something shifted. Not loudly. Quietly. My mother called less. Not because she stopped caring, but because she didn't want to bother me. When she did call, her voice sounded careful, like she was walking on thin glass. She stopped asking when I would come home. That scared me more than her questions ever did. One evening, I missed her call. Then another. Then another. When I finally called back, my father answered.
Ma.
I asked. "She's resting," he said. That was all. Something tightened in my chest. I started noticing guilt in small moments. When I cooked and failed to get the taste right. When I came home to an empty room. When I fell sick and there was no one to ask, "Did you take medicine?" I told myself this was adulthood. This was independence. But independence felt very cold. That I remember one call clearly. My mother said, "The house feels very quiet these days." I laughed lightly and said, "You should watch more TV." She laughed too, but it sounded forced. Then she said, "Your room is just the way you left it." I did not know what to say. Time passed. Festivals came and went. Birthdays passed with short calls and quick wishes. One year, I forgot my father's birthday. I remembered late at night. When I called, he said, "It's okay. These things happen." but I could hear the disappointment he tried to hide. That night, I cried quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, just silent tears into my pillow. I started feeling irritated for no reason. Small things made me angry.
Noise. Crowds.
I felt lonely even when people were around. Sometimes, I imagined my mother sitting alone at the dining table, serving food for 2 instead of 3. Sometimes, I imagined my father staring at the door when evening came. I pushed those thoughts away. I told myself I was overthinking. One rainy evening, my mother called again.
Her voice sounded weak.
"I slipped in the kitchen today," she said casually. My heart skipped. "Are you okay?" I asked quickly. Yes, she replied. "Just a small fall." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" I asked. She paused, then said softly, "I didn't want to worry you." That sentence broke something inside me. After that call, I could not sleep. I kept seeing her standing alone,
Falling.
getting up by herself. I realized then that my absence was not just emotional. It was physical. I was not there when they needed me. I told myself I would visit soon. I promised myself I would be more present. But life moved on as it always does.
Work.
Commitments. Excuses. And while I was busy living my life, my parents were quietly growing older. Without me, this part of my life was not full of loud fights or cruel words. It was full of something worse. Neglect.
Distance.
Silence. And silence can hurt more than anger. I did not know then that a moment was coming. A moment that would stop everything. A moment that would make all my excuses feel small and meaningless. I did not know that regret was already standing at my door, waiting patiently. The call came on an ordinary day. That is what hurts the most. Nothing felt different that morning. I woke up late. I rushed through my routine. I remember being annoyed at small things. The noise outside. The slow internet. I did not know that life was about to divide itself into 2 parts. Before the call, and after. My phone rang while I was getting ready for work. It was my father. That alone felt strange. He never called at that hour. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. I was running late, but something inside me said, "Answer."
So I did.
"Hello," I said. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard his breathing. Heavy. Uneven.
"Papa?"
I asked. He took a moment before speaking. "Your mother," he began. And then he stopped. That pause felt endless. "What happened?" I asked, my voice suddenly small. "She's in the hospital," he said quietly. The room started spinning. "Hospital?" I repeated. "Why?" He cleared his throat. "She collapsed this morning." I could not hear anything after that. I do not remember sitting down. But suddenly I was on the floor. My heart was racing. My hands were shaking. "Is she okay?" I asked. Another pause. "They are checking," he said. "You should come." That was all.
No panique.
No drama. Just a simple sentence that carried a lifetime of fear. I packed without thinking. I did not even know what I put in the bag. As I rushed out, memories flooded my mind. Her slipping in the kitchen. Her tired voice. Her saying she did not want to worry.
Me.
All the signs were there. I just chose not to see them. The journey felt longer than ever. Every sound felt too loud. Every delay felt cruel. I kept checking my phone. No new messages.
No updates.
My mind kept imagining the worst, and then scolding itself for imagining it. I whispered to myself again and again. She will be fine. She has to be. When I reached the hospital, my father was sitting outside the room. He looked smaller, older. His shoulders were bent in a way I had never seen before. When he saw me, he stood up slowly. "You came," he said, as if there was ever a doubt. I hugged him. For the first time in years, he did not pat my back. He just stood there, still. "Where is Ma?" I asked. He pointed toward the door. "She's inside." I wanted to run in, but my legs would not move. I was suddenly afraid of what I might see. When I finally entered the room, my heart broke quietly. My mother was lying there, so small,
So still.
Her eyes were closed. Machines beeped softly around her. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. I sat beside her bed and held her hand. It felt warm, but weak.
Ma, he whispered.
Her eyes slowly opened. When she saw me, she smiled. That smile shattered me. You came, she said softly. Tears rolled down my face. I'm here, I said. I'm here. She squeezed my hand gently. I knew you would, she replied. That was when the guilt became unbearable. She believed in me, even when I was not there. The doctor spoke later. Words like exhaustion, stress,
Age.
nothing dramatic, nothing sudden, just years catching up quietly. He said, she needs rest and support. Support. That word echoed in my mind. I stayed by her side that night. She slept most of the time. My father sat quietly in a chair. We did not talk much. We did not need to. The silence was heavy but honest. At one point, my mother opened her eyes and looked at me. You look tired, she said. I almost laughed. You're the one in the hospital, I replied. She smiled faintly. Still, she said, you should take care of yourself. Even now, even here.
She was worried about me.
That night, memories attacked me. Every ignored call, every delayed visit, every soon. I realized something painful.
I had always assumed there would be time.
Time to visit, time to care, time to make things right. Time is not something we own. The next morning, my mother asked something that changed everything. Will you stay for a few days? She asked gently. A few days. That was all she asked. I looked at my father. He said nothing. I nodded quickly. Yes, I said. I'll stay. She smiled and closed her eyes. Those few days turned into a mirror. I watched my father help her sit up, bring water, adjust pillows. I saw how careful he was, how tired he looked, and I realized how much they had been doing alone. For years. One afternoon, while my mother was asleep, my father spoke. She always says you're busy, he said quietly. I said nothing. She tells me not to call you too often, he continued. Says she doesn't want to disturb your life. My chest tightened. She never complained, he said. Not once. That was when I understood. Their silence was love. When my mother was discharged, I took them home. The house felt fragile. Every sound mattered. Every step was careful. I cooked for the first time in that kitchen. The food was simple. My mother watched me from the chair. You don't have to do everything, she said. I want to, I replied. And I meant it. But deep inside, fear had settled. Fear of leaving again. Fear of repeating the same mistake. I began to see time differently. Each moment felt borrowed. One evening, as I helped my mother walk to her room, she said softly, you don't have to give up your life for us. I stopped. I don't want to give it up, I said. I want to share it. She looked at me with tired eyes full of love. That's all we ever wanted, she said. That night, I did not sleep. I sat in my old room and cried silently. Not out of panic, not out of fear, but out of regret. Regret that comes when you realize love was always there.
And you were the one who walked away.
I knew then that things could not go back to how they were. Something had shifted inside me. And I also knew the hardest part was still ahead. Because regret does not end with realization. It demands change that I stayed longer than I planned. At first it was just a few days, then a week, then another. Each morning, I told myself I would decide tomorrow. But tomorrow kept arriving with the same question. How do you leave people who need you? Life at home moved at a slower pace now. My mother woke up late. She walked carefully. She rested often. I noticed things I had ignored before. The way she leaned on furniture for support. The way she paused to catch her breath. My father watched her constantly, without staring, without speaking. Love does not always announce itself. Sometimes it just stays alert. I took over small tasks.
Cooking. Cleaning.
At first, it felt awkward, like I was pretending. But slowly, the house began to breathe again. We ate together at the old dining table. the same table that once held my childhood. My mother smiled more. My father spoke a little louder. It felt like time had softened its grip. One evening, I told my workplace I needed more time. I expected questions, pressure. Instead, I felt relief. For the first time, I chose family without guilt. My mother noticed the change in me. "You've become very quiet," she said one afternoon. "I'm thinking," I replied. She nodded. "You always thought too much," she said gently. I smiled. Some things never change. At night, when the house fell silent, regret crept in. Not loud, not dram, just a steady ache. I replayed memories like old films.
Moments primers ruixar. Moments primers ignorat.
I realized regret is not about what you did wrong. It is about what you failed to protect. One night, I heard my parents talking in their room. My father said, "She looks tired." My mother replied, "She's carrying too much inside." I sat outside their door and cried quietly.
They were still worrying about me.
I began to understand something important. My parents never needed perfection. They never needed sacrifice. They only needed presence. A week later, my mother was stronger. She could walk longer. She laughed more easily. But she still tired quickly. I helped her wash dishes one morning. She said, "You don't have to stay." I paused. "I know," I replied, "but I want to." She did not argue. She never did. One afternoon, my father and I sat outside as the sun began to set. He looked at the sky for a long time. Then he said, "We never wanted to hold you back." "I know," I replied. "We just wanted to be part of your life," he continued. His voice was steady. That made it harder. "I shut you out," I said quietly. He shook his head. "No," he said. "You went looking for yourself." I swallowed. "And now?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "Now I want to come home," I said. He nodded once. "That's enough," he said. Coming home did not mean giving up my dreams. It meant redefining them. I began working remotely. I adjusted my life. It was not easy, but it felt right. There were moments of frustration, moments of fear, moments when I wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then my mother would smile at me from across the room, or my father would ask if I wanted tea, and the doubt would soften. Healing is not a straight line. Some days were heavy. Some days felt light. But we moved forward together. One evening, as we sat at the table, my mother said something quietly. "I'm glad you came back before it was too late." I froze. Too late. Those words stayed with me. I realized how close I came to a regret with no repair. That night, I wrote a letter to myself. I wrote about presence, about listening, about not waiting for emergencies to love fully. I folded it and placed it in my old drawer. Slowly, the house filled with sound again. Small sounds. Clinking dish, soft laughter. Radio music in the background. Life did not return to what it was. It became something new, something more aware. I learned that love is not proven by distance or sacrifice. It is proven by showing up. Again and again. And still, there was one thing left. A final understanding. A quiet acceptance. That love does not erase regret, but it gives it meaning. Time did not suddenly slow down after I came home. Days still passed.
Seasons still changed.
But I started noticing time differently. Not as something to chase, but as something to hold carefully. My mother continued to heal. Not quickly. Not perfectly. Some mornings were hard for her. Other days, she felt strong. I learned to measure days not by productivity, but by presence. Did we eat together? Did we talk? Did we laugh, even a little? Those things began to matter more than anything else. One afternoon, it rained softly. I stood at the window, watching drops slide down the glass. My mother came and stood beside me. "Do you remember," she said, "how you used to be afraid of rain?" I smiled. "You would hold my hand," I said. She nodded. "And now?" she asked. "Now I understand why," I replied. She looked at me, confused. "Because you never let go," I said softly. Her eyes filled with tears. But she smiled. Forgiveness did not arrive as a grand moment. It came quietly, in shared cups of tea, in folded clothes, in silence that felt safe. My parents never blamed me, not once. And that made forgiving myself the hardest part. One evening, I finally said the words. "I'm sorry," I said. My mother looked surprised.
For what? She asked.
"For leaving," I replied. "For not being there." She reached for my hand. "We never felt abandoned," she said gently. "We always felt loved." That was when I understood something important. Love is not measured by proximity alone, but presence gives it strength. My father spoke less as always. But one night, as we sat together, he said, "I sleep better knowing you're here." That sentence stayed with me longer than any speech ever could. Life slowly found a rhythm. Not the old one, not the rushed one, a calmer one. We learned each other again, not as parent and child, but as people sharing time. Sometimes, I still think about the version of myself who walked away. I do not hate her. She was searching. She was learning. But I wish I could tell her one thing. You don't have to leave love to find yourself. There are moments when fear still appears. Fear of loss. Fear of regret. But now I do not run from it. I sit with it. Because fear reminds me what matters. If you are listening to this, I want to tell you something. Do not wait for a hospital room. Do not wait for a phone call that changes everything. Call them. Visit them.
Sit with them.
Not because you owe them, but because one day, you will wish you had. Parents grow old quietly. They do not announce it. They adjust. They endure. They love. And sometimes, all they want is to feel included in your life. I learned that regret is heavy, but gratitude is stronger. I am grateful I was given time. Not everyone is. Now, when I leave the house, my mother still says, "Be careful." And my father still says, "Call when you reach." I smile every time, because those words are not limits. They are love. And when I look back at my life one day, I know this will matter.
Not the job.
Not the noise, but the quiet evenings, the shared meals, the moments I chose to stay. That is the lesson I carry now. Love does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be present. And sometimes, coming home is the bravest thing you can do.